Hello folks, welcome to the next video in our series here. In the last video we talked about the transition from urban managerialism to urban entrepreneurialism and the strategies that were forced to be adopted. We'll talk more about that in a future video. But in this video I want to talk about Schumpeter's ideas of economic development, because when we use the term entrepreneurial city, the ideas are actually built and drawn from Schumpeter rather than from Harvey himself, although it's sort of rooted in there. Yeah, in fact, it's precisely Jessup from the reading who sort of developed this notion of an entrepreneurial city, and he's very much about Schumpeter's idea of how the economy works. So let's talk about that for a second. Schumpeter makes a distinction between growth and development, and says they're very different things, right? He defines growth as a circular flow with savings reinvested in increasing overall volume of production, right? So there's profits being made, but they're plowed into creating the new situation. Not creating a new situation, but in increasing the volume of sales, right? So you can think about, perhaps kind of along these lines of a little global city. We've got maybe, we got iron ore, and that is input for steel, and steel gets to be an input for a car, and also iron, let's see what, goes to some other metallic form that maybe, becomes pots and pans, right? What else have we got? And these things are bought by consumers. That's us, you and me. I'll make us green because we have so much money. Whatever, right? I mean, steel goes into a million different things that we buy. That also will go into cars. I don't know, maybe we got also aluminum here that goes into making pots and pans, and also goes into making cars, right? So you can think of the economy as a sort of flow of both inputs, material inputs or non-material inputs going in one direction, and cash coming back the other way, right? And so there is a perpetual flow, a circular flow within the economy. It doesn't escape these things. It just keeps flowing from one place to another. Now what Schumpeter is suggesting is that growth takes place when the profits that are made in this process are plowed back into the network and serve to basically thicken the lines, right? Each node gets a little bit bigger. We make some more iron, more of whatever this was, and that goes into, more of that flows into making more pots and pans that we buy more and more of. I think we had aluminum over here. That increases, and basically what we're saying here is savings just goes, and the whole thing, the pattern stays the same. It just gets, the lines and the relationships just get thicker and deeper and stronger, right? There's nothing that changes in this circular flow. And so for him, that sort of inflation of the network, of the circular flow of the network, is growth, and refers to economic growth. Development, however, relies on new combinations. It relies on breaking up this network and creating new networks, right? So for him, let me make sure I'm with you, right? In my notes, development only refers to such changes in economic life as are not forced upon it from without, but arise from its own initiative from within. That is, development is endogenous change, right? And this is a good term that you should know. Endogenous means from the inside, internal, and so endogenous growth is growth that comes from within, right? And typically in modern economies, that endogenous growth and changes in economic life are a result of investment in research and development that create new ways of doing things. And that's different from, well, a war started and all of a sudden, our blockade stopped us from getting any iron, and that forced us to begin to build a new network, right? That's not development. That's just a forced change from outside. However, if R&D creates new possibilities, then that is endogenous, and that counts as development. And so it is also, as he says, the spontaneous and discontinuous, right? It's not a smooth transition from one thing to another. It's just a boom, boom kind of change in the channels of flow that disturbs the equilibrium that has been established in this network, and forever alters and displaces the equilibrium that previously existed, right? So the basic notion here would be that instead of iron, I don't know, I'm making this up, right? Let's say instead of steel, somebody invents, as we have done, right, carbon fiber, right? And that incredible new technology replaces steel, right? So now all of a sudden we've got flows going this way, and and all of these connections. Oh, that should be a bigger one, right? All of these connections are destroyed and supplanted by our carbon fiber here. That then becomes the root of what we need. And let's just say that in order to make carbon fiber, we also need some other input that adds to it, right? So we have here, in effect, a brand new network, and that is what Schumpeter means by development. The network itself has transformed and become something completely new. Now, one thing one concern I would point out to you in this theory of the difference between growth and development is that is precisely this notion that it needs to be spontaneous and discontinuous, right? That means that these networks can't shift gradually, right? It has to be, it's not that our use of steel sort of evolves slowly into carbon fiber or something. I don't think that's possible, but you get the idea that perhaps an existing process could just evolve slowly over time into something different. And that over time, as the quantity of change, the amount of change, reaches a particular threshold, it really constitutes a qualitative change, right? At some point we migrate to a new material and we really are in a new world, but we can't, we can't consider this a discontinuous change. So I think there is some room to push back against this distinction between growth and development. But I do think it's an interesting one and a useful one for us. Because his focus on entrepreneurship is on the creation of this sort of new combination. I'm sorry, I just realized now you couldn't see whatever novel inputs we had for our carbon fiber that I had introduced behind my picture. But we'll just pretend there's a couple like this, right? So these new combinations represent innovation, which is the entrepreneur's hallmark, right? And he identifies 5 ways in which we can come up with new combinations, right? That is, the first one is that you might introduce a brand new good or a brand new quality of good, right? So it could be that, somebody invents the smartphone, and that represents a brand new good that changes what is produced and how it's produced, as we surely know, right? The portable handheld computer has distinctly changed our lives experience. But it could also be the introduction of a new quality of good, right? That was the original sort of iPhone strategy, right? It's not just a smartphone, but it was a really nice smartphone, right? Fancy design, very slick, new interface. It's the same thing, but it's of a higher quality, right? And so so that can change what it is that people buy and the materials that go into it, right? The original iPhones probably required a different balance of materials to produce them than other smartphones. I don't know how different it is, but it might be different enough to really change these things. The second approach is that it might be an entrepreneur might innovate and introduce a new method of production. And now let me just point out here that there's a difference, of course, between innovation and invention. Invention is the discovery and creation of these new techniques. Innovation is the application of new techniques, right? So the entrepreneur applies new inventions of whatever quality, of whatever character. And that one of those inventions might be a new method of production. And so, this might be some sort of production efficiency gain, right? I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. Maybe an example was homogenized milk and cheese and things like this, or pasteurized, right? That there was, in the production of milk and the distribution of milk, right? Originally, when it was fresher and perhaps healthier for us, it had to be delivered from the farm to your house within a very, very short time in order to preserve its quality and its hygiene, its sanitary character, right? But once we introduced pasteurization, this new method of producing milk that ensures that the milk won't grow bacteria that will make you sick, then all of a sudden the delivery of milk changes, right? And in the US case, the milk delivery guy goes away, and suddenly we can just buy them on our own at grocery stores. We don't need it delivered fresh every day. We can just buy it and it stays in our refrigerator for a week or more. In Korea, a place like Korea in Asia, right, where there is no sort of history of dairy consumption, pasteurization allows for a safer and a healthier introduction of that product, which changes the consumption markets and what people do, right? So when we talk about a new method of production, it doesn't necessarily have to be something like like homogenization that preserves the milk. It could even be a new method of distributing goods or handling a commodity commercially, right? It might be that you innovate in the way that you do your marketing. Look at maybe television advertising, right? At some point, that was novel stuff. And in the U.S., right, we got Trump's friend, the pillow guy. Whoever used to buy pillows from television? Nobody. Come on. Mattresses from television? You crazy? But now, some people introduced the idea of advertising these goods on television and have changed the way that market works. Amazon also changes the way it works. Rather than having retail outlets, they just have big warehouses and the internet front store that we use to do our purchases. So those would constitute new methods of production. The third innovation might be opening up a new market, right? We might additionally find, not just our American or Korean consumers, but, as Korea's aid programs do, maybe suddenly Ethiopia becomes a new market for Korean goods, right? Wherever they are, our cars and things like this. So this discovery of a new market is also a form of innovation that can totally reshape the way that the circular flow of capital. Fourth, we might find a new source of supply for one of our goods, right? Instead of let's say we're getting this I don't know. Well, we'll say we were getting this iron, and we were mining it from, domestically, but suddenly, huge deposits of iron are discovered in Tanzania, and so now all of a sudden, we've got Tanzanian iron going different places, which then leads to these connections being reduced, and the market gets reshaped that way. And this new source of supply can be something from simply a new discovery or a decision to invest in a new place, to imperial conquest, right? In the late 1800s, and arguably even after that, imperialism was a form of innovation that introduced both new markets and new supplies, new sources of supply. And finally, here we can talk about a new organization of an industry, right? And this can be establishing a monopoly position or breaking a monopoly position, right? In a sense, we talked about Amazon a minute ago. Amazon is reorganizing the industry not just through new methods of production and distribution, right? But also by establishing itself as in a monopoly position for sales, right? It's very hard. I mean, Korea is different, right? Coupang might be our closest comparison here in Korea. But Amazon sort of globally is establishing itself as just a huge monolithic monopolist. And that is a way of dominating an industry. Google establishes itself as a monopolist in search. And it can be, right, it's not just establishing a monopoly, it can be breaking a monopoly. There are definitely hopeful promises that the monopoly of the FANG firms, Facebook, Apple, Airbnb, Netflix, and Google will be broken up in the near future, right? And perhaps new options available. I mean, Netflix's position is under devastating onslaught now from the introduction of all these new streaming services, right? So, so these things can be considered new combinations that reshape our circular flow of capital and represent development rather than growth. With that point, I'm going to elaborate a little bit further and make a couple of additional points here. There are two things I want you to remember as well with this, sort of notes on these things. First, it's not essential that the new combination be carried out by existing producers, right? So it's not that the people who make iron decide that they're going to produce carbon fiber, right? Or steel, and they shift to carbon fiber, right? In fact, it's more often the opposite. The people who are doing steel don't want things to change, right? They've got a nice, steady, regular situation. They want to keep it that way. They're making profits. Everything is good. But it's somebody from outside who wants to break in with their new technique or what have you, sort of under my face. I'll put my face where the carbon fiber is there. People like me want to break into the market and come from sort of different part of the economy to produce a new good that breaks up and creates this new combination, right? You know, and obviously you can think about the Netflix example. You know, Netflix is pretty happy the way things were when they were dominating the market. And so it's really actors from outside of Netflix and from that monopoly that are challenging that monopoly. Similarly, Netflix, you know, challenged Blockbuster and other services that would rent out DVDs physically in your neighborhood. You guys wouldn't remember that, but you know, back in the day, you had to go to the Blockbuster retail outlet in order to borrow a DVD to show at home, and you had to return it within 24 hours or 48 hours or a week, whatever it was. So those firms didn't want to change the model. It was somebody from outside that was trying to take advantage of the internet that did innovate in that form. So new combinations are more often carried out by people from outside of existing producers rather than by existing producers. And so this can sort of explain the sort of rise and fall of families, firms, and also business cycles. You know, as we see the rise and fall of different forms of production. And the second thing to remember is that as my sort of editing of our circular network here implied, that introducing new means of production and new combinations of production means that resources have to be deviated from their original pathway, right? So it might be that whatever whatever iron had been going into making steel now had to get redirected to carbon fiber up behind my face. And so this line gets thinned down a little bit, right? The volume decreases. So the resources have to be redirected. And in order to do that, that then means that these new combinations require command over the means of production, right? You have to be able to, the folks behind my face need to be able to outbid the steel producers to get the iron that they need. And I'm going to close here with the notion that these new combinations are at the core of what Schumpeter calls creative destruction. I hope you've heard of this term, creative destruction. It's from Schumpeter. I presume you've heard of it. It's one of these Silicon Valley mantras of creating new forms, new combinations of economic production that destroy old ones. And so for Schumpeter, the very core of development, not growth, growth just inflates, the core of development, which creates new combinations and changes the circular flow of capital. At the heart of that is creative destruction, the creation of new combinations that destroy old combinations. With that, I'm going to pause and move on to our next video where I'm going to talk briefly about the motives of entrepreneurs according to Schumpeter.